It took exactly 12 minutes for my life to fracture. The call from the bank came on a generic Tuesday, informing me of a $50,000 debt for a luxury car I had never seen. My parents assumed I would swallow the betrayal in silence, just like I had done since childhood. They were wrong, and the price of that mistake was about to cost them everything. My name is Elena, and up until 9 a.m. this morning, my life was a carefully balanced equation of solitude and stability. At 29 years old, I had finally carved out a space that belonged solely to me. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Seattle that overlooked a gray alleyway rather than the ocean, but the rent was paid with my own money. I had a mid-level marketing job that demanded 45 hours a week, a savings account that was slowly inching toward a down payment on a condo, and a credit score that I polished like a trophy. I was not rich. I was not powerful, but I was free. I was sitting at my desk, staring at a spreadsheet and nursing a lukewarm coffee, when my phone vibrated against the laminate wood. The caller ID displayed a generic toll-free number. I almost let it go to voicemail, assuming it was another robocall regarding an extended car warranty I did not need. The irony of that thought would haunt me later. I slid my thumb across the screen. "This is Elena," I said, my voice flat, already prepared to hang up. "Ms. Elena Vance?" "This is Marcus from the Fraud Prevention Department at First National." The voice on the other end was professional but firm. "I am calling to verify some recent activity regarding your auto loan." I frowned, leaning back in my ergonomic chair. "I think you have the wrong number. I don't have an auto loan. I take the bus." There was a pause on the line, the kind of silence that feels heavy. "Ms. Vance, are you saying you aren't aware of the account opened 3 weeks ago? A loan for $52,000 for a 2024 Obsidian SUV?" I laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no humor. "This is a scam. I didn't buy a car. I haven't signed for a loan in 4 years. Remove my number from your list. Ma'am, please listen." The man's voice dropped an octave, losing its customer service shine. "I have your file right here. The loan was originated at a dealership in Ohio. The first payment is overdue. We have a signed electronic agreement." My blood ran cold. Ohio. I grew up in Ohio. I had not lived there in 7 years. But the geography was too specific to be a random coincidence. My fingers started to tremble as I reached for a pen. "Read me the information," I whispered. "What information do you have? I have a social security number ending in 8240, he recited. My breath hitched. That was mine. "The address on file is—" He rattled off a house number and street name that I knew better than my own face. It was the house where I learned to walk. It was the house where my parents still lived. I felt a physical blow to my chest, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. A stranger hacking my identity would have used a P.O. box or a random drop house. A stranger would not have used my parents' home address. "Who signed it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "It is an electronic signature. Ms. Vance. It matches the digital footprint of previous applications. It was authorized using all your personal security questions. Mother's maiden name. Name of your first pet. High school mascot." The room blurred. I looked at the spreadsheet on my screen, the rows and columns of orderly data, and realized my reality was dissolving. Those security questions were not things a hacker found on the dark web easily. Those were intimate details. Those were family trivia. My mind flashed back to the last time I visited home for Christmas. I remembered the way my mother looked at my younger brother, Lucas. He was 26, unemployed, and constantly talking about how he just needed one big break to get his life on track. I remembered my father pulling me aside, asking if I could spare a few $100s because Lucas was going through a hard time. I remembered the way they always looked at me, the sturdy one, the one who could handle things, the one who did not need help. They always expected me to be the safety net, But I never agreed to be the victim. "Ma'am, are you still there?" the banker asked. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "I am here. We need to know how to proceed. If you are stating this is fraud, we have to open an investigation. But since the address matches your previous history—" He trailed off, but I heard the implication. It looked like I was lying, or it looked like I had made a mistake. I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. I sat in the silence of my office, the hum of the air conditioner sounding like a roar in my ears. $52,000, a luxury car for a brother who could not hold down a job, co-signed by parents who claimed they were broke. They did not just borrow money. They stole my name. They stole the credit score I had spent a decade building. They stole my future to finance a shiny metal box for their golden child. The betrayal was not sharp like a knife. It was heavy like a stone, settling deep in my stomach. I looked at the black screen of my phone. I knew who did it. The only question that remained was a technicality. Who exactly held the pen when they ruined my life? I stared at the black screen of my phone, but I was not seeing the reflection of my office. I was seeing the kitchen table in Ohio, scuffed from years of elbows and spilled milk. That table was the altar where I was sacrificed, over and over again, to the god of keeping the peace. My parents loved labels. To them, I was the strong one. It sounded like a compliment, but it was actually a burden disguised as praise. Being the strong one meant I did not need comfort. It meant I did not need help. It meant that when the storm came, I was expected to be the roof, while my brother, Lucas, was allowed to be the frightened child hiding in the basement. Lucas was the baby. It did not matter that he was 26 years old with a beard and a history of driving under the influence. To my mother, he was always fragile, always just one bad break away from success, always in need of just one more chance. I remembered the summer I turned 22. I had just graduated and saved $2,000 from waiting tables. I was going to move out. My father sat me down, his face grave. "Elena, honey." "Lucas got into a bit of trouble," he had said, refusing to look me in the eye. "He needs a lawyer. We don't have the cash liquid right now. We know you have that savings." "That is my moving fund," I had replied, my voice shaking. "You are strong, Elena. You can earn it back." My mother had chimed in, pouring me a cup of tea I did not want. "Family helps family. Don't be selfish." Selfish. That was the weapon they used whenever I tried to draw a boundary. I gave them the money that day. I stayed in their house for another 6 months, working double shifts. While Lucas drove around in a car, his lawyer kept him out of jail for crashing. It started small. A cable bill in my name because their credit was shot. A co-signed student loan that I ended up paying the interest on because Lucas forgot. I let it slide. I paid the bills. I told myself it was the price of admission for having parents who still spoke to me. I thought if I paid enough, eventually, I would buy my freedom. But this was different. $52,000 was not a cable bill. It was not a mistake. You do not accidentally buy a luxury SUV in your daughter's name. This required premeditation. I closed my eyes and pictured it. I could see them sitting in the dealership. I could see my father pulling out a folder with my social security number, which he likely kept from when I was a dependent. I could see my mother nodding along, justifying it in her head. "Elena won't mind," she probably whispered to herself. "Elena has good credit. Elena can handle it. Lucas needs this car to get to interviews. It is for his future." They had made a choice. They sat down, looked at the options, and decided that my financial ruin was an acceptable price to pay for Lucas's comfort. They did not even call to ask. They simply took, because they believed everything I had belonged to the collective, while everything Lucas had belonged to Lucas. The coldness in my chest began to burn. It was a clean, sharp anger. For years, I had been the fix-it girl. I had been the safety net. They thought this would be the same. They thought I would scream, cry, and then quietly pick up the bill because I was too afraid to sever the tie. They had miscalculated. I looked at the clock. It was 9:10. In Ohio, it was past noon. They would be home. My father would be watching the news. My mother would be in the garden. Lucas would probably be driving my car. I picked up the phone again. My hands were steady now. I was not calling as their daughter. I was calling as a victim of identity theft. I dialed the number. It rang once, twice. "Hello," my mother's voice chirped, bright and unassuming. I took a breath. The time for being the strong one was over. Now, I was just the one holding the match. "Mom," I said, "we need to talk about the car." "What car?" my mother asked. Her voice went up a pitch. It was the specific tone she used when she broke a plate and kicked the pieces under the refrigerator before anyone saw. "The $52,000 SUV, I said, gripping the phone. "The one bought 3 weeks ago. The one registered to your address." "Do not lie to me, Mom." The bank just read me my own Social Security number. There was a rustling sound on the other end, followed by a muffled exchange. I heard my father's heavy footsteps approaching the phone. The air in my office felt suffocating, despite the cool temperature. "Elena!" My father's voice boomed, loud and distorting slightly through the speaker. "You need to calm down. You are sounding hysterical." "I am not hysterical," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I am asking why there is a loan in my name that I did not sign." It is just a formality," he said, the hesitation betraying him. "Lucas has a job prospect, a really good one, in real estate. He needs a vehicle that commands respect. You know how it is. You can't show up to sell a house in a beat-up sedan." I stared at the wall, blinking rapidly. "So you bought him a luxury car." "With my credit, we didn't buy him a car," my father corrected, his tone shifting to that condescending explanatory mode he used when teaching me to change a tire. "We simply used your credit profile to secure the financing. His credit is a little bruised right now. We just needed a bridge. It is temporary." "Temporary," I repeated. "Dad, that is a 5-year loan. That is not temporary, and you forged my signature. Do you understand what that means? Don't use words like forged." My mother chimed in from the background, sounding offended. "We signed for you. We are your parents. We have signed things for you since you were born." "I am 29 years old," I shouted, finally losing the battle for composure. "You cannot sign legal documents for me. This is fraud." "Oh, stop it!" my father snapped. "You are blowing this way out of proportion. We are going to make the payments. Lucas is going to make the payments once his commissions start coming in. You won't even notice. We just needed your score to get the low interest rate. You aren't using it for anything right now anyway." The entitlement in his voice made me nauseous. They spoke about my financial identity like it was a lawnmower sitting in the garage, something they could borrow without asking because they assumed I wasn't using it. "The first payment is already overdue," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "The bank told me. You haven't paid a cent. There was a mix-up with the bank transfer," my father said quickly. Too quickly. "It is being handled. Look, Elena, why are you being so difficult? Your brother finally has a chance to make something of himself. Are you really going to be the one to sabotage him over some paperwork? Sabotage him you stole from me. We didn't steal." My mother yelled, her voice trembling with indignation. "We raised you. We paid for your braces. We paid for your piano lessons that you quit after 2 years. Do you have any idea how much money we spent on you growing up? And now you are screaming over a signature. That is not the same thing." I said, "It is exactly the same thing," my father roared. "We sacrificed everything to make sure you were successful. You have a good job. You have money. You are sitting in a high-rise office while your brother is struggling to find his footing. You owe us. Elena, you owe this family. If you can't help your brother get a leg up, then I don't know what kind of daughter we raised." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and toxic. They were not apologizing. They were not afraid. They were angry that I had caught them. In their twisted narrative, I was the villain for noticing the knife in my back. "I want my name off that loan," I said, my hands shaking uncontrollably now. "I don't care how you do it. Refinance it. Return the car. I don't care. Get my name off. We can't," my father said, his voice cold and final. "We already tried. They won't approve it without you, so you are just going to have to sit tight and trust us. We will pay it. Stop being so selfish and think about someone other than yourself for once." "If you report this," my mother added, her voice dropping to a tearful whisper that I knew was a performance. "If you cause trouble for Lucas, I will never forgive you. Do you hear me? Never." The line went dead. They hung up on me. I sat there, holding the phone against my ear, listening to the silence. They had flipped the script so fast I felt dizzy. I was the victim, yet I was the one being told I was selfish. I was the one being told I owed them my credit, my safety, and my future because they had done the bare minimum of raising a child they chose to have. I looked down at my notepad. I had written the word fraud and underlined it 3 times. They thought this was a family dispute. They thought they could bully me into silence like they always did. But as the shock began to fade, something else took its place. A cold, hard realization. They did not see me as a person. To them, I was just a resource. And you do not negotiate with people who see you as an object. I put the phone down on the desk. My hands were no longer shaking. I sat before my computer screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. My parents' voices still echoed in my ears, demanding gratitude for their betrayal. I pushed their words aside. Emotions were a liability now. I needed data. I navigated to the website of a major credit bureau and paid the fee for an expedited full report. The download bar crawled across the screen, agonizingly slow. When the PDF finally opened, I scrolled past the green check marks of my student loans and my primary credit card. My stomach turned. There it was. The auto loan for $52,000. But right below it was another entry I did not recognize. A store credit card for a home improvement chain, opened 4 months ago with a balance of $3,400. I clicked on the details of the auto loan application. They had not just forged my signature, they had invented a new version of me. The application listed my annual income as $140,000, nearly double what I actually made. It listed my position as senior director, a title I was at least 5 years away from earning. They had lied to the bank to get the loan, and they had used my identity to anchor the lie. I felt a cold sweat prickle at my hairline. This was not just a family dispute. This was bank fraud, federal crimes. If the bank found out about the inflated income on their own, they could come after me for obtaining credit under false pretenses. If I stayed silent, I was not just a victim, I was an accomplice. I grabbed my phone and scrolled to a contact I had not spoken to in months. David. He was a forensic accountant I knew from a networking group. He was the kind of person who saw the world in black and white regulations. "Elena," he answered on the second ring. "Everything okay?" "You never call during work hours. I need a hypothetical opinion," I said, walking to the window to stare at the brick wall of the adjacent building. If someone found out a relative took out a loan in their name, and they didn't report it immediately, what happens? "Define didn't report it," David said, his tone sharpening. "I mean, if they tried to pay it off themselves to avoid getting the relative in trouble." "Elena," David sighed, the sound heavy with warning. "That is a terrible idea. The moment you make a payment, or the moment you acknowledge the debt without disputing it as fraud, you are ratifying the contract. You are telling the law, yes, this is mine. But it gets worse. How if the loan was obtained with false info, like fake income or a fake job title? That is criminal fraud. If you accept the debt, You are accepting the fraud. If the bank investigates later and sees the lies, you go down for it. You could lose your job. You could be blacklisted from the financial system. You could go to prison. I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. Prison. It is a felony. Elena, listen to me. Is this hypothetical? I hesitated. I don't know yet if this is real, David said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You have a very narrow window to act. You have to file a police report. You have to file an affidavit of identity theft. You have to nuke it. It would destroy them, I whispered. The people who did it, it would ruin them. They already ruined themselves when they committed a felony. David shot back. The only choice you have left is whether you want to go down with the ship. You can't save a drowning person if they are holding an anchor. Elena, they will just pull you under. I ended the call and looked back at my computer screen. The cursor blinked next to the fraudulent credit card entry. $3,400. That was likely the new patio set my mother had bragged about on Facebook. While I was eating instant oatmeal to save for a condo, they were renovating their house on my credit. For 29 years, I had been trained to protect the family image. I had been trained to absorb the impact so Lucas wouldn't have to. But David's words cut through the guilt. They will just pull you under. I realized then that my parents were not asking for help. They were asking me to be their scapegoat. They were banking on my love being stronger than my survival instinct. I looked at the phone number for the local police precinct. I did not dial it yet. But for the first time in my life, the thought of protecting my family felt less like duty and more like suicide. I was done bleeding for people who would not even offer me a bandage. I reached for a fresh notebook. I was not going to yell anymore. I was going to document. The anger that had been boiling in my chest began to cool, hardening into something brittle and sharp. I did not call the police immediately. I did not drive to the dealership to scream at a manager. David's warning had terrified me, but it also gave me a roadmap. If I was going to sever the limb to save the body, I needed a scalpel, not a hatchet. I placed my phone flat on the desk and opened a new document on my laptop. I titled it Timeline of Events. My parents were counting on my emotional volatility. They expected me to yell, cry, and eventually capitulate out of guilt. They would never expect me to go quiet. They would never expect me to agree with them just long enough to put the noose around their necks. I picked up my phone and sent a text message to my mother. I kept my hands steady, typing out the words with calculated precision. Mom, I am looking at my budget. I just want to confirm that you and Lucas are covering the $900 monthly payment for the SUV. I can't afford that right now. I watched the 3 little dots appear and disappear on the screen. She was typing. She was deleting. She was typing again. Finally. The bubble turned blue. Yes, honey. Don't worry. Lucas will make the payments. We just used your name for the approval. It is all under control. I took a screenshot. I emailed it to myself. I saved it to an external hard drive. That was the first nail in the coffin. She had just admitted in writing that the debt was theirs, but the name was mine. Next, I dialed my brother. I knew he would pick up. He always did when he thought he was in the clear. I turned on the voice recorder app on my tablet and set the phone on speaker. Hey, Elena Lucas answered. He sounded relaxed, probably playing video games. Mom said you were freaking out earlier. You okay? I am trying to understand. Lucas, I said, forcing my voice to sound defeated rather than furious. Did you know Dad was going to sign my name, or was it a surprise, I mean? We talked about it, Lucas said, and I could hear the shrug in his voice. Dad said your credit was just sitting there, and I really need this car for the new gig. I promise I'll pay you back. Eventually. You knew he forged my signature. I pressed, leaning closer to the microphone. It wasn't, like, malicious, he stammered, his voice getting defensive. We're family. Why are you making it sound like a crime? You have plenty of credit. I ended the call. I saved the file as admission of guilt. Lucas. I spent the next 3 hours erasing myself from their reach. I walked into a bank branch 3 blocks away, a bank my family had never used, and opened a new checking and savings account. I transferred every cent I had, leaving my old accounts with a zero balance. Then came the passwords. My parents knew everything about me. They knew my mother's maiden name. They knew the name of my first pet. They knew the street I grew up on. These were the keys they had used to unlock my life. I went through every financial portal I owned and changed the security questions to lies. My mother's maiden name was now Smith. My first pet was now Godzilla. I built a digital wall of falsehoods that they could not climb because the answers existed only in my head. Finally, I went to the credit bureau websites, one by one. I clicked the button to freeze my credit reports. It felt final. It felt like locking the gates of a fortress. By the time the sun went down, my apartment was dark. I sat on my floor, surrounded by printed bank statements and highlighted affidavits. I felt a profound sense of isolation. I could not call my aunt. She would tell my mother. I could not call my cousins. They worshipped Lucas. I was entirely alone in this war, but as I looked at the stack of evidence, the fear began to recede. For 29 years, my life had been a democracy where my parents held all the votes. They decided what I owed, what I should tolerate, and who I should be. I looked at the folder labeled fraud. Okay. I whispered to the empty room, let's see how you handle me now. For the first time in my life, I was not the daughter who obeyed. I was the witness who remembered, and I was ready. I drove 6 hours to Ohio in silence. My phone buzzed incessantly in the passenger seat, displaying name after name of the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, but I did not answer. When I finally pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, the engine ticking as it cooled, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The fear was gone. The guilt was gone. All that remained was the cold, hard weight of the manila folder in my bag. I unlocked the front door with my key. They were sitting in the living room, the television blaring a game show. The domesticity of the scene made my stomach turn. They were relaxing while my financial future was burning to the ground. Elena, my mother said, standing up, her hands smoothing down her apron. She looked nervous, not happy. We didn't know you were coming. Turn off the TV, I said. My voice was low, but it carried enough weight that my father reached for the remote without a word. I walked to the coffee table and dropped the folder. It landed with a heavy slap against the wood. What is this? My father asked, his brow furrowing as he reached for it. That is the loan application, I said, standing tall while they sat. It lists my income as $140,000. It lists my job title as senior director. And right below it, that is the screenshot of Mom admitting you used my name. And the transcript of Lucas admitting he knew about it. My father flipped through the pages, his face reddening with every line he read. My mother peered over his shoulder, her hand flying to her mouth when she saw the text message printed on stark white paper. You. My mother looked up at me, eyes wide with betrayal. You recorded your brother. You took screenshots of our private conversation. You committed federal identity theft, I countered, my voice steady. Do not talk to me about privacy. We were trying to protect this family, my father shouted, throwing the papers back onto the table. He stood up, towering over me in a way that used to make me shrink. We are in a tight spot. Your brother needed help. We did what we had to do. Why are you acting like we murdered someone? It is just money. Elena, it is just a number on a screen. It is my life, I said. It is my ability to buy a house, my ability to get a job. If the bank finds out I lied on an application, even if it was you who wrote the lie, I could go to jail. I looked at Lucas. He was sitting on the edge of the sofa, staring intently at the carpet. He looked like a child waiting for a storm to pass, expecting that if he stayed quiet enough, the adults would fix it. Lucas, I said. He did not look up. "Lucas, look at me." He slowly raised his head. His eyes were wet, but not with remorse. He looked terrified of losing his toy. "Tell them," I said. "Tell them to take my name off the loan. Be a man for once in your life and tell them this is wrong." Lucas opened his mouth, but my mother cut in before he could make a sound. "Don't you dare bully him!" she shrieked, stepping between us. "He is going through enough. You are the selfish one here, Elena. You always have been. You think you are better than us because you moved to the city. You think you are too good to help your own blood. I am not helping," I said. "I am being harvested. We will pay it back," my father bellowed, his fists clenching at his sides. "We told you we will make the payments. Why can't you just trust us? Because you stole from me," I stated. I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply delivered the truth like a package they did not want to sign for. You stole my name. You stole my trust. And you did it because you thought I was too weak to do anything about it. If you report this," my father hissed, stepping closer, his face inches from mine, "you will destroy your brother's future. He will have a criminal record. Is that what you want? You want to see your brother in handcuffs." The room went silent. The air was thick with the threat. They were holding Lucas's future hostage and blaming me for the gun in their hand. I looked at my father. I looked at my mother, whose face was twisted in a mask of ugly desperation. And finally, I looked at Lucas, who looked away again, refusing to save me, refusing to save himself. I am not the one who put him in handcuffs. "Dad," I said softly. "You did." I reached down and picked up the folder. "You have 24 hours to pay off the loan in full or remove my name," I said. "If you don't, I am going to the police." "You wouldn't dare," my mother whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "We are your family. Not anymore," I said. I turned around and walked out the door. Behind me, the silence broke into the sound of my mother sobbing and my father swearing. But I did not look back. For the first time in 29 years, I was not walking away to hide. I was walking away to fight. The 24-hour deadline expired at 12:01 on a Monday afternoon. My phone did not ring with an apology. My email did not ping with a confirmation of a payoff. They had gambled on my history of submission, convinced that the threat of destroying the family would paralyze me. I picked up the phone and dialed the detective I had spoken with briefly the day before. "This is Elena Vance," I said, my voice devoid of the tremor that had plagued me for days. "I would like to proceed with the formal charges." The next 3 hours were a blur of bureaucratic efficiency. I sat in a gray cubicle and filled out an identity theft affidavit. I listed the date of the unauthorized inquiry. I listed the dealership in Ohio. I listed the names of the individuals I suspected of fraud. Writing the names of my parents and brother on a criminal complaint should have felt like a betrayal. Instead, it felt like correcting a clerical error. Once the police report was filed, I called the fraud department at First National. I uploaded the police report number and the affidavit to their secure portal. "We have received your documents," Ms. Vance, the fraud specialist, told me. "Effective immediately. The $52,000 loan is frozen. You are not responsible for any payments during the investigation. We will notify the credit bureaus to suppress this trade line from your report. What happens to the vehicle I asked? The loan is considered invalid due to fraud," the specialist replied. "The bank will move to reclaim the collateral. The asset recovery team will be dispatched to the address on file." I hung up. It was done. I was legally protected. The invisible weight of the debt vanished, replaced by the heavy, silent armor of the law. The reaction was not immediate. Bureaucracy takes time to travel. I went to work on Tuesday. I went to the gym on Wednesday. I slept 8 hours a night. For 2 days, the world was quiet. Then, on Thursday morning, the bomb detonated. My phone lit up during a staff meeting. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again, then my father, then Lucas, then my aunt. I placed the phone face down on the conference table and continued taking notes. When I returned to my desk, I had 14 missed calls and 6 voicemails. I put on my headphones and pressed play, my pen hovering over my notebook to log the times. Elena. Oh, God. Elena. My mother's voice sobbed through the speaker, broken and hysterical. There are sheriff's deputies here. They are asking for your father. They are asking about the car. What did you do? Call them off. Please. Tell them it was a mistake. I transcribed the message, 10:14 a.m. Mother acknowledging law enforcement presence. The next message was from my father. You ungrateful, vicious little traitor, he snarled, the rage distorting the audio. I gave you life, and you send the police to my door. You better fix this. You call them right now and tell them you gave us permission. If you don't, I swear to God, Elena, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? I transcribed 10:16 a.m. Father using threatening language, attempting to coerce witness. The final message was Lucas. They are taking the car. He sounded like he was hyperventilating. Elena. The neighbors are watching. They are hooking it up to a tow truck. Mom is screaming. Dad looks like he's having a heart attack. Why are you doing this? I can't go to jail. Please, I'm scared. I transcribed 10:22 a.m., brother confirming asset repossession. I did not feel happy. I did not feel sad. I felt a clinical sense of satisfaction, the way a surgeon feels when a tumor is successfully excised. They were experiencing the natural consequences of their actions for the first time in their lives. They were panicking not because I was being cruel, but because the buffer I had provided for 29 years was gone. My phone rang again. It was my mother. I watched the screen glow. I watched the name fade away as the call went to voicemail. I realized then that I had the most powerful weapon in the world. I did not need to scream. I did not need to explain. I did not need to justify why I did not want to be robbed. I simply needed to let the law work. I sat in my quiet office, surrounded by the hum of productivity, and for the first time, I understood the true power of a boundary. A boundary is not a request. It is a line where my responsibility ends and theirs begins. They were on their side of the line now, and it was raining. The silence I had imposed did not last. As evening fell, the nature of the calls shifted. The rage and the threats evaporated, replaced by something far more insidious. They stopped trying to bully me and started trying to break me. My mother called at 7 o'clock. I answered this time. I needed to hear it. I needed to witness the final death of the illusion that we were a family. Elena, her voice was a ragged whisper, the sound of a woman who had spent the afternoon weeping into a pillow. We are sitting in the dark. Your father is staring at the wall. He hasn't moved for hours. Do you know what you have done? I didn't do anything. Mom, I said, sitting on my living room floor, staring at the city lights. The bank did. The law did. They are talking about charges. Elena, she cried, her breath hitching. Criminal charges. Fraud. Conspiracy. They said Lucas could go to prison. He is your brother. He is your baby brother. He is 26 years old, I replied. He is scared to death, she wailed. He didn't mean to hurt you. We got desperate. We thought we could pay it back before you noticed. We were going to make it right. Doesn't that count for anything? Doesn't intent matter? Intent matters, I said coldly. You intended to deceive me. You intended to use me. There was a scuffle on the other end, and then Lucas's voice came through. He sounded frantic, breathless, like an animal caught in a trap. Elena, you have to stop this. He pleaded, "You have to call them back. Just, just tell them you forgot. Tell them you gave us verbal permission and you just forgot about it. If you say that, it all goes away. Please. My life is over if you don't. I can't have a felony on my record. I won't be able to get a job. I won't be able to rent an apartment." I listened to him beg. I waited for the words, "I am sorry." I waited for "I was wrong." I waited for "I shouldn't have done this to you." They never came. He was not sorry he stole my identity. He was sorry he was facing consequences. He was not worried about my credit score or my trust. He was worried about his rental applications. Even in the depths of his terror, the world still revolved entirely around him. "You want me to commit perjury?" I asked quietly. "You want me to lie to the police and say I authorized a $52,000 loan so you can get away with it. It is not perjury. It is saving your family," my father shouted from the background. "If you don't do this, this family is dead. Do you understand? We will never recover from this. You are holding the gun. Elena, put it down." The metaphor hit me with the force of a physical blow. For years, I had thought that if I just worked hard enough, if I was just successful enough, they would finally see me. I thought if I was the perfect daughter, they would love me as much as they loved Lucas. But as I listened to them demand that I sacrifice my legal standing to save their comfort, the truth finally crystallized. I was not their daughter. I was their resource. I was a credit score with a pulse. I was an emergency fund they felt entitled to liquidate. They did not love me. They loved what I could provide. And now that I had stopped providing, they did not see a person in pain. They saw a broken appliance that refused to work. The grief was sudden and overwhelming, a wave of nausea that made me close my eyes. But beneath the grief, the steel in my spine hardened. "I am not holding the gun," I said, my voice steady despite the tears running down my face. "I am just refusing to take the bullet for you anymore. Elena, don't you hang up," my mother screamed. "If you hang up, I am not withdrawing the report." I said, "I am not lying for you. You did this. You have to live with it." "You are heartless," Lucas yelled, his voice cracking. "You are a monster." "No," I said, "I am just a stranger to you now, and strangers don't pay your debts." I ended the call. I blocked their numbers. The silence returned, but this time, it was not empty. It was heavy with the finality of a funeral. I had lost my parents and my brother that night, but I realized with a devastating clarity that I never really had them to begin with. I had only leased their affection, and the lease had just expired. The resolution did not arrive with a bang, but with a sterile, digital ping. It had been 42 days since I filed the police report. 42 days of waking up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, wondering if the system would fail me, or if my parents had found some loophole to drag me back into their mess. I was standing in the break room at work, watching the coffee machine drip, when my phone vibrated. It was an email from the fraud department at First National. The subject line was simple: "Notice of dispute resolution." My heart hammered against my ribs. I tapped the screen. "Dear Ms. Vance, we have completed our investigation regarding the auto loan ending in 459. Based on the affidavit of identity theft and the supporting police report, we have determined that this account was opened fraudulently. We have removed all liability from your profile. We have notified the 3 major credit bureaus to delete this trade line from your credit history. This matter is now closed regarding your responsibility." I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. The $52,000 anchor that had been tied to my ankle was gone. Just like that. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Detective Miller, the officer handling my case in Ohio. I walked into the stairwell, the concrete walls cool against my back. "Ms. Vance." His voice was gruff, businesslike. "I wanted to let you know that we are moving forward with the charges based on the bank's findings." "What? What does that mean exactly?" I asked. My voice, echoing slightly in the empty space. "The bank is pressing charges for grand larceny and fraud," Miller explained. "And since you maintained your affidavit, the state is pressing charges for identity theft and forgery. We executed the warrants this morning." I closed my eyes. I could see the house. I could see the peeling white paint on the porch. I could imagine the cruiser pulling into the driveway where the SUV used to sit. "Did they?" "Were they arrested?" I whispered. "Yes, ma'am," Miller said. "Your father and your brother were taken into custody. Your mother was cited as an accomplice but released on her own recognizance due to health issues. But the other two, they are being processed at the county jail right now." I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the concrete step. I tried to feel guilt. I tried to summon that old, familiar panic that used to govern my life whenever I disappointed them. But it was not there. "Did they say anything?" I asked. "Your father was vocal," Miller said, choosing his words carefully. He kept saying it was a family matter. He said you would drop the charges once you realized what was happening." "I realize exactly what is happening," I said. "Ms. Vance." The detective softened his tone slightly. "I see this a lot. Family fraud is the ugliest kind, but you need to know. Once the bank is the victim, it is out of your hands anyway. You didn't put them in that cell. The evidence did. I know," I said. "Thank you, detective." I hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the dust motes dancing in the shaft of light from the window. I was not in Ohio. I did not see the neighbors peeking through their blinds as my father was led away in handcuffs. I did not see Lucas crying in the back of a squad car. I did not see my mother standing alone in the doorway, realizing her enablers were gone. I was safe in Seattle. I was free. I opened my banking app. The credit score that had tanked was already showing signs of recovery. The balance on the loan was 0. The past 6 weeks had been a violent storm, but the wreckage was not mine to clean up. A coworker opened the stairwell door, looking concerned. "Elena, you okay? You've been in here for 20 minutes. I looked up at her. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that felt lighter than it had in years. "Yeah," I said, standing up and brushing the dust off my skirt. "I am fine. Actually, I am better than fine." I walked back into the office. The email from the bank was still open on my screen. It was just text on a white background, but to me, it looked like a declaration of independence. The war was over. I had won. But as I sat down and placed my hands on the keyboard, I realized that winning did not feel like triumph. It felt like survival. And for now, that was enough. It has been 6 months since I received that email from the bank, and in that time, I have learned that the best revenge is not a scream. It is not a scene in a courtroom or a dramatic confrontation in a rainstorm. The most devastating revenge is simply removing your hands from the wheel and letting the crash happen to the people who cut the brake lines. I sat in a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning, watching the rain streak against the glass. On the table in front of me was a stack of documents. This time, they were not police reports or affidavits of fraud. They were closing papers for a condo. My condo. The realtor, a kind woman named Sarah, slid a pen across the table. "You are sure you don't want to wait for anyone else to look these over?" she asked, smiling gently. "It is a big commitment for one person." I picked up the pen. The weight of it felt good in my hand. "No, I trust my own judgment. I don't need anyone else to sign off on my life." I signed my name. It was the same signature my father had forged, but this time, it carried the weight of my own consent. It belonged to me again. I had heard through a distant cousin that my father and brother took plea deals to avoid maximum prison time. They were serving probation and owed restitution that they would likely be paying for the rest of their lives. My mother was apparently working part-time at a grocery store to make ends meet, telling anyone who would listen that her daughter had abandoned the family in their time of need. She was right. I had abandoned them, I had abandoned the role of the savior. I had abandoned the role of the victim. I had abandoned the idea that sharing DNA obligated me to be a financial host for parasites. People often talk about the cost of cutting off family. They talk about the lonely holidays and the empty photo albums, but they rarely talk about the peace. My phone no longer rang with demands disguised as emergencies. My bank account was no longer a target. For the first time in 29 years, I woke up every morning knowing exactly where I stood. I walked out of the coffee shop and stood on the sidewalk, breathing in the cold, damp air of the city. I thought about the $52,000 debt that had almost drowned me. It was gone, erased from the ledgers of the bank. But the invisible debt, the one I had been paying since childhood, the tax of being the strong one, the interest rate of guilt was finally paid in full, too. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a blocked number. It could have been a telemarketer. It could have been my mother, calling from a payphone to try one last guilt trip. It could have been Lucas, looking for someone to blame for his probation officer's strict rules. I did not wonder who it was. I did not feel that old spike of adrenaline. I simply reached into my pocket, silenced the call, and kept walking. I had built a wall around my life, not to keep people out, but to see who respected me enough to knock at the gate instead of trying to break it down. My family was on the other side of that wall, screaming at bricks that would never answer back. I turned the corner toward my new home. I was alone, but for the first time in my life, I was not lonely. I was free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment down below and share your thoughts on the situation. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Victoria Revenge Stories channel, hit the like button, and if you want to support us even more, smash that hype button so this story can reach more people who might need to hear it.